Hey guys, welcome back to Middle Class Reactions. It seems like Joe Rogan is now just openly making fun of Douglas Murray for that debate performance. So we're going to take a look and see what he's saying, and then we're also going to take a look at Douglas Murray on another, I think it was Breaking Points, or not Breaking Points, I'm sorry. Wanted to say it was a BBC interview, but we'll see for sure when I get to the point, or to that point in the video. But he's just openly lying about that debate with that he had on Rogan. I'm on the Breaking Points YouTube channel here, just because they've already clipped out what I need, and they do make a few good points on this. So we're gonna see what's going on.
Have you been there?
Right, that's a good point.
You haven't been?
By the way, how is he in all these wars? Can I just go to wars? By the way, how are you allowed to just go to wars?
You should at least
Can you just
have the
go to
courtesy of going.
Now, I've never actually thought about that, but Tim Dillon kind of makes a good point on this. Wait, why's my camera? Sorry, guys, 1 second. There we go. All right. Tim Dillon kind of makes a good point on this, which is like, how do you just get to go to those war zones? I know with Douglas Murray, he was sponsored by Israel. It was an IDF sponsored trip is how he got to that. But yeah, I've never really thought about that, but it's actually kind of a good question.
Can I just go to wars, or do I have to come back and say what people want me to say about the wars? Can I go to the wars and have my own opinions, or do I have to have the opinions?
Not if you want to go back.
That's right. That's right. It's very interesting, this war tourism. How do I get on this war tourism?
Yeah.
I'd like to go to the Ukraine. I want to go. I want to go. I want to go to all this war tourism.
Do you have any awards that they can melt down and make bullets out of?
Joe, think about this. Do I seem like a guy that has a lot of awards?
Didn't you get one of those YouTube plaques when you hit 100,000?
I don't even know where they send it. I don't know where. I don't know where they're sending those YouTube plaques.
We've got a few of those.
But I like this idea of war tourism. I like the idea of going to a war and then coming back, having a very black and white view.
Yes, I've been there.
I get it, and I know, and interesting. Okay, I like that.
Yeah.
I like that. I love that.
You feel better than the other people.
Well, of course, there's a lot of people. It gets very murky. Most people I know that have been to war have a very murky, complex view of things.
Which is very true. I have a lot of friends that have been overseas, been to war, been there, done the thing, and almost none of them are just completely black and white. I think I'll work with one guy who's just like, yeah, we should just nuke the entire Middle East. But besides that, he's really the only one who is that black and white on it.
But it is good to go to a war and then come back and be as sure as you were before you came.
You don't have to go for very long.
No, you go for an hour.
Couple hours.
It's a lunch.
Yeah.
It's lunch on the front line.
Put on a flak jacket that says press.
Whew, that's rough there, Ryan. For Douglas, for anybody who doesn't get the photo reference, let's put that one on the screen. Our producer Griffin's been dying to show everybody.
Okay, guys, if someone's gonna try and tell me this was not a sponsored tour, look at this picture. If that doesn't scream photo shoot, I mean it's so blatantly obvious. And I wish Dave Smith and Joe Rogan would have known about this before the debate that they had with Douglas Murray. Because this is just openly ridiculous.
This photo for quite some time now. This is the chair where Sinwar, what was killed by an Israeli drone. And as you can see, Douglas there on an IDF-sponsored tour with his big press flak jacket, not really in danger because, again, he's on a, IDF military-sponsored thing. Tim actually made the best point, and that's something that I immediately texted Dave about, is I was like, dude, he keeps saying you've never been there. The only reason he gets to go is because he's a pro-war propagandist, and so the government is allowing him to go. If you or I tried to set foot in the crossings, we're done. No. All right, we're done. I don't even know if they'll let us in the country. All right, and having been to Israel before I was ever made any public statement, holy shit, I have never been put through the ringer. Any other country in the world, why are you here? What are you doing? Is your dad Muslim? It's wild. Yeah. And that's if you're just a normal visitor to the country. That's not made up. Those are actual questions. Nowadays, oh man, yeah, if you and I try to set even 100 miles foot in Gaza, not gonna happen.
A lot of people who've been come back with a far worse impression of the situation on the ground than they had before. But yeah, it was quite strange to hear Murray say it, because anybody who's casually followed the conflict knows that Israel has banned Western journalists from getting into Gaza. So then how on earth did he sneak in? Oh, it turns out the IDF, put him in their own little flak.
That's also one that's been talked about on Piers Morgan specifically a lot. Is until recently they haven't let anybody in, no matter the journalist, and now they're letting in very, very pro-Israeli, quote unquote. I have a hard time calling Douglas Murray a journalist just because he's a bought and paid for shill. But now they're letting some journalists in, but they're people like Douglas Murray that'll go and just spout just lies. Which we'll see more about in a minute.
Jacket and drove him to this scene for this photo op. I don't think you should be able to wear a press vest in that circumstance. In what way are you press? Like no, you're just completely.
You're just play acting. I mean,
all right, guys, we're gonna skip ahead here a little bit because I want to get to the other. Oh, it was Bill Maher. That's who it was. Douglas Murray was on Bill Maher.
Had to further concern troll together on Bill Mahr's show. Let's take a listen.
You were on Joe Rogan a couple of days ago, a week ago, something like that. It got a lot of press. And I'm glad you said what you said, which is, I like Joe, but he has on people who entertain these crazy conspiracy theories and doesn't really push back on them. It's okay to have, I'm a free speech absolutist pretty much, but there seems to be no pushback on this.
The reason I did this pushback is, you just have to. You just have to, in my view. It's basic social hygiene. If you've got somebody who's coming along who pretends to be a historian, who then can always do the thing of saying, oh.
By the way, trying to gatekeep who can talk about what is not social hygiene.
Oh, I actually don't call myself a historian. It's just other people I allow to call me a historian. I'm not a car mechanic, but if I kept on being introduced as a car mechanic, I would say, oh, no, you got the wrong guy. So they don't mind it. They don't mind it. They have this slip out. These people that I was trying to call out on...
By the way, and I've brought this up in multiple videos, Douglas Murray's not an expert on this stuff either. He has a degree in English. He's not an expert. So what gives him the right to tell other people who are also not experts, although I would argue people like Daryl Cooper are vastly much more, have a much larger expertise in this field than him. But what gives him the right to decide who's an expert and who isn't?
Joe's show, they are doing things like Hitler wasn't that much of an anti-Semite.
Okay, it's not what he said. Daryl Cooper came out and said in the early 1930s, Hitler wasn't as openly anti-Semitic, and the breaking points guys will break this down here after this video. But one, if I was Daryl Cooper, I would sue Douglas Murray right here for defamation, because that's not what he said.
Main problem in the 20th century was Winston Churchill.
Also not what he said. He said, and this is, Daryl Cooper said, quote, was messing with my buddy Jocko, and I'm being hyperbolic when I say this, but I think Winston Churchill was the chief villain of World War II. And then he kept on going, and he said, quote, I don't mean he committed the most atrocities. I don't mean he committed the worst acts. End quote. And then he went on to say that it's his belief that Winston Churchill is the reason that World War II was more than an invasion of Poland, which is a debatable topic. You can debate that. But he didn't say that the worst problem in the 20th century was Winston Churchill.
Winston Churchill was the warmonger.
Also not what he said.
Adolf Hitler wanted peace.
Not what he said.
And look, it's a matter of social hygiene. Don't feed me this shit.
Nobody's feeding him this. He just and he did this on the Joe Rogan debate quite a bit. He makes up arguments that didn't exist and that no one's making, and then tries to argue against them. And then, of course, he's doing that in front of Bill Maher, which isn't going to disagree with him. Also, the funny point here, he went after Dave Smith for being a comedian and talking about this kind of stuff. You don't see him going after Bill Maher, who is also a comedian who's talking about this kind of stuff. So it's just open hypocrisy.
What they're watering and what's going to come up underneath them are going to be people who believe this rod. And a lot of people, you can clearly see on the right at the moment, are very happy if you can denigrate the tradition of Winston Churchill and pretend that Adolf Hitler wasn't so bad, because then you can do.
No one in their right mind is doing that. Literally, no one is saying, "Oh, Adolf Hitler wasn't that bad of a guy. Yeah, he wasn't that bad." No one's saying that.
Do things like Christian nationalism. You can do really, really tough nationalist stuff.
Why are so many people afraid of that word, nationalism? Like, does anyone ever go, Japan's a nationalist country. They're Japanese nationalists. No, you go to Japan and you're like, hey, sick, we're in Japan. Why do people go to Japan? Because it's freaking Japan. It's Japanese. That's why you go. No one goes to Japan and goes, I wish there was more black people here. I wish we had a bunch more Mexicans. No one says that. So like when it's nationalist in that kind of instance, perfectly fine. But when someone in America is going, all these immigrants we got coming over right now, I'm not a fan of that. We should probably, keep that down. Then you have asshats like Douglas Murray who's like, nationalism. Watch out, fellas.
They
You
basically
can buy Kanye albums.
That's the last stage.
So
To be fair, Kanye is crazy. I'll give him that.
straw manning, he's like equating Dave Smith, Daryl Cooper, and Ian Carroll all in one. As he showed on the show, he did not even really know that much about Cooper and or Ian Carroll whenever he was trying to denigrate them. But
He didn't know Daryl Cooper's name. And he went on a 45-minute rant about how he's wrong. Didn't know his name. Nor does he listen to his content.
let's just come back to the final point about having been there and about gatekeeping. This is a guy who, again, when he was in his, mid-20s, wrote Neoconservatism and Why We Need It in 2006, when the Iraq War was a disaster. Has since written books about migration, about wokeness, and now about whatever his latest In Defense of the West book is. He
Also wrote this huge piece on how Ukraine can win the war. And this was in 2022. So obviously, Mr. Expert over there isn't fantastic about calling the right shots here.
He is just as unqualified and as lack of an expert as any of those individuals. And to be honest, actually less informed, obviously, from, his public comments that are all on the subject. They're so reductive. And then finally, for these two free speech, non-gatekeepers and all these people, bullshit. You're advocating right there for gatekeeping. And when's the last time anybody interesting was on Bill Maher Show? Be serious. Let's be honest.
And on the point of him not being informed, he's really playing weird games with this line where he was saying that people, quote unquote, downplay or Hitler's anti-Semitism. So apparently, what he complained about on Rogan, he's like, how,
if you were to get into that, we can. But yeah,
we should do a second.
Oh,
of it.
sure.
Because what he's saying. So Daryl Cooper and others have said that at various times throughout Hitler's rise to power, he downplayed his own anti-Semitism and his true designs for the Jewish people in Germany and throughout Europe, because those views were unpopular with the German public
and abroad,
in particular abroad, and he had to smuggle those views in, and then once he got power, then he and people say, well, he wrote Mein Kampf. It's like, yes, so.
To be fair, or just so everyone knows who's watching this, in case you don't already, Hitler wrote Mein Kampf in 1925, 1928, somewhere in there.
It feels like this shouldn't have to be explained to people, but apparently it does. Politicians often will say something early in their career that is the truth, and then as they rise through power, they downplay that.
Correct.
Say, I didn't really believe that. I'm not for 150% tariffs, or I'm not for pure free trade. Whatever is in your interest in the political moment, you say that. He's not saying that Hitler was not a thorough anti-Semite through and through, with designs on a genocide, a Holocaust. That's not what he.
By the way, I think the term that Daryl Cooper used to describe Hitler was a methed out genocidal maniac. So it isn't like he's trying to say Hitler's some cupcake.
He's saying.
Let me just lay this out for people. Chapter 1, I was doing a rereading. Chapter 1, Volume 2, Ian Kershaw's Hitler, 1936 to 1945 called Nemesis. There's a citation. Chapter 1 about the 1936 Berlin, which year was the Olympics? I think it was
36, yeah.
1936 Berlin Olympics. They took down all the anti-Semitic signs specifically to do what? To make sure, to downplay the anti-Semitic. So this is a matter of empirical fact.
Because they thought it was embarrassing.
This is a matter of fact. Okay, fact. That they even admitted it in documents that Kershaw is able to review. And by the way, Kershaw is about as Kershaw is not a quote-unquote objective biographer. He hates Hitler. I mean, rightfully so. He hates Hitler, and he makes it very clear. And you know what's funny is he actually does the same thing in his introduction of his book that Daryl does, where he goes, I detest Hitler. I find him disgusting. However, I want to view with an objective as a lens as possible as to how this person's ideology was able to rise in Germany. And with that, we must have some empathy and to try and to understand from which this arose so that it may never happen again.
Right, and if you listen to Douglas Murray...
Yeah.
And how Sager just explained that is what a lot of people, not just people, I mean, yeah, obviously Douglas Murray, but what a lot of people have a hard time doing is like, okay, pull yourself back from the Hitler's a demon, because he's not. He's not a demon. He's a human. He's a person. So it's like, how does 5-year-old baby Hitler, because this is one thing you got to remember, Stalin, Hitler, Mao, all those guys. At one point, they were a 5-year-old. At one point, they were a normal 5-year-old. How do they go from there to Adolf Hitler? That's responsible for all the horrible atrocities that he was responsible for. You have to extrapolate yourself from saying, oh, this guy's just a demon, and just, you know, and then just looking at how it happens. There's a wonderful book called Ordinary Men that does this very, very well. In fact, I might have the book. One sec. Let me turn my camera. Let me see if I have the book, guys. One second. So, all right. I'll hold this up here. Ordinary Men. There you go. Amazing book. Phenomenal book. And what it goes over... There we go. What it goes over is how the normal police force that was in Poland can end up being responsible for like 55 or 60% of the Jewish deaths. And that book does a very good job of not just looking at them like, hey, these are demons, to like, okay, how did normal people end up into this? You have, if you're going to look at anything like World War II or the Armenian genocide or whatever it is, you have to be able to extrapolate yourself from, oh, they're a demon, to be able to look and see at, like, okay, how do you get there? You have to be able to do that. You have to be able to do that if you're going to talk about this. If you're going to talk about any of these kind of topics, you have to be able to do that. If you're coming into every topic like, hey, Hitler's a demon, so no matter what you say, Hitler's a demon, you're not going to get anywhere.
Then your view of Hitler is that he always was, from his chest, expressing his full anti-Semitic viewpoint, and he came to power anyway.
Yeah.
The reason that Douglas Murray's view is dangerous is because it is wrong, and because it would lead you then to say, okay, a future Hitler who we're going to try to prevent from coming to power is only someone who was always screaming their anti-Semitism from the rooftops. And that if they downplay it at any point, that's not Hitler. And so we can then it's okay. Okay, they've toned down some of their rhetoric, so let's give them a second chance. What the actual reading of the actual Hitler is that you have to figure out what they're going to do on your own, not just from their own rhetoric. Because if you allow their rhetoric to control what you think of them, they're just going to fool you like Hitler fooled the German public. So Murray's interpretation, which is ahistorical and illiterate, is actually the dangerous one because it could cause people to then miss the next person.
Totally. Yeah, I mean, yeah, I could go on this forever, but it's just ridiculous to me that somebody who is supposedly an expert. I mean, this is, you know,
and what makes him an expert?
It's funny. I'm talking about this book as if
That's my question on this: is what makes Douglas Murray the expert here? Why is he the one gatekeeping who can talk about this and who can't? He has a degree in English, and he is a journalist that goes on IDF-sponsored trips to Gaza and then speaks on it as if he's an expert.
No, I'm reading that's the most pop
Right, that's the basic,
historical.
yeah.
That is like, that's like reading Band of Brothers for the first time about World War II. Okay, that's it. That's the
not deep
level of
research here.
historiography that it takes to be able to cite something like this.
All right, guys. So that's the end of that video. It's interesting to see. This is the first time I've seen Joe Rogan really talk about it. And I know he kind of mentioned it a little bit today with Jordan Peterson, which I'll be doing a video on. But yeah, I'm glad Douglas Murray's getting dragged, as he rightfully should. So, yeah, that's all I got for y'all tonight. I hope y'all have a great night. Like, share, subscribe. All those things help me a lot. Do all the things that you know you're supposed to, and I'll catch y'all next time.